Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Donna Kalinisan, together with my classmate Sharami Eduarte, Danmer San Sardegna, Maribic Bilog, and Miss Lady Lee Campomanes. For today's video, we are going to tackle about self-appraisal approach. So, what is self-appraisal approach? Self-appraisal approach is a strategy that gives students more responsibility for their own learning. It also called a self-evaluation or self-assessment. It is a method that allows evaluation of one's own strengths and weaknesses in specific tasks. It also promotes metacognition about what is being learned and effective practice for learning.
Thank you po. Good evening. My name is Sharame Duarte and my report is about importance and benefits of self-assessment. Self-assessment can provide insight into students through comprehension and can help to identify gaps in students' knowledge, encouraging students to examine their and levels of understanding can also be an important wake-up call, identifying areas that require improvement. So, what are the benefits of self-assessment? For number one, interpreting. So, interpretation is a fundamental part of learning, but rarely do we take time to interpret the learning process itself. Did it take you very long to learn a new concept? Would you more context or background have helped? Are are you finished studying or do need another session? Interpreting your own learning helps you recognize patterns and habits that you can adjust for optimal retention. So for number two, organizing. Most of us don't take time to mentally organize individual concepts into more general patterns of cause and effect, or to break large concepts down to a smaller point. Usually, it's an instructor job to do this or or she designs a lessons, but there are no guarantee it will be done effectively. The advantages of self-assessment is that you can give yourself the opportunity to organize information however you want. The result is a stronger connection between concept and ultimately better learning.
So, good evening. I'm Dan Merchant P. Sardegna, and I'm gonna continue the report of Miss Shara May. So, number three, connecting. When you assess your own learning, you make connections between all sorts of things you wouldn't otherwise think about. You see the relationships between learning environment, study habits, instructional methods, subject matter, etc. And over time, it becomes possible to manipulate these factors in order to best suit your learning preferences. Number four, guiding. Once you reflect on what you've learned, what you haven't, and what you'd like to, you will have a much better idea of how to guide your own learning. And you'll save yourself a ton of time. Imagine sitting down to study for the degree and having a written summary of your strengths and weaknesses in algebra, which you recorded your 4 years ago while studying for the SAT. What a time saver. And last, number five, retaining. How often do we repeat history when it comes to learning, and how often is it because we haven't reviewed or used a piece of information since we first learned it? The more we think about something we've learned, whether through written, spoken, or reflective, means the more likely we are to remember it. That's all. Thank you po.
Good evening. I'm Marivic Bilog, and this is the continuation of our report, The 10 Essentials of Self-Assessment. At the most fundamental level, self-assessment is about being more aware. You could call it mindfulness or metacognition, self-reflection or introspection, whatever terms makes the most sense to you. The important thing is that you take the time to do it. And once you've gotten yourself into the habit of it, it will be easier to view learning as something you have control over. Number one, record what you know and what you don't. You can determine the right time to do this for yourself, whether it's after a study session, a lecture, or even a test. The point is to do it, because most often of us don't. Most us passively absorb information in the hopes of retaining it, and this is simply not enough. Number two, measure notes taken against material remembered. If there a positive coordination between the amount of notes you take and the amount of information you remember come test time. If not, you may want to rethink your note-taking habits, especially since you are sacrificing your attention to the lecture if you are constantly writing things down. Maybe you should try tape recording the lecture instead and writing notes later. Number three, test yourself frequently and in different ways. You won't really know what you know until you test yourself. So do it frequently, daily even, and in different formats. If you used flashcards yesterday, challenge yourself to give a mini lecture on it today. The more variety, the better your brain will remember it. Number four, measure retention over time. If the goal is to retain information for as long as possible, you'll need to keep reviewing it occasionally over time. This is where learning portfolios can really help, but you'll need to start seeing beyond midterms and finals toward real-world situations in which you can use the material to your advantage. If you can recall it in 10 years' time, that is. Number five, note your interest level. The course you struggle with are not always the courses you find uninteresting, and the courses you find uninteresting aren't always the ones you struggle with. When you don't get the grades you want, identify what the real reason is and take steps to solve the problem yourself.
Good evening. I'm Lady Licampumanes, and this is the continuation of report of Miss Marivic Bilog about the 10 essential of self-assessment. Number 6, test your ability to relay information to others. The truth is, in my opinion, if you can explain a concept to someone else, you haven't really learned it. Number 7, connect new material with prior knowledge. This is something only you can do despite much Number 8, test recall out of the concept. What is it so hard to answer trivia question because they force you to provide information out of context. But that's exactly what makes a champion quiz player to impressive the ability to recall or a detail or fact completely out of the blue without associative clause or the original context in which it was the first learned. One memory technique called interleave practice suggests that alternating flashcards from different subjects within the same study session is actually better than keeping the subjects separate. Number 9, make progress more personal. Progress is not about test scores and grades. It's about learning, becoming more involved in our own learning early on. Through a personal portfolio or other means will make it easier to actually care about it and to think of it as an ongoing interconnected process. Last, number 10. Measure study habits against result. There's no there's no use employing the same study strategy time after time. Doesn't work. So how do you work whether it works or not? Your test result and grade should give you some indication, but well, most of us simply aim to study harder. Next time, we should instead aim to studying that progress is in our control. So this is the end of our report. Good evening, everyone. I hope you I hope you learned something about of our topic, self appraisal approach.